You've tuned into Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes. Your access to success strategies and more to help you move onward and upward with your life. Listen in each week as she interviews others who have really taken their essence to the next level and truly unpaused their life. Now here's your host, Dr. Callie Estes.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. This is Dr. Callie Estes, and I am founder of the Addictions Academy, the Addictions Coach, and Rehab Rescue. Welcome to Unpause Your Life. This is a great podcast where we showcase people who have done something extraordinary with their life. I welcome you, and I hope you enjoy all of our guests.
On my way, found a reason to wake up another day.
Before we get started, let's hear this short message from one of my supporters.
All the things that you won't do.
Did you know 81% of Americans would like to become a published author? Chances are you might be one of them. What's stopping you? Writing and publishing a book takes a lot of work and is expensive, right? Well, not anymore. For your next book project, or even your first, team up with Hassle-Free Books. They make it so easy to become an author. They remove all of the fuss and struggle and make it smooth and simple. And it's far more affordable than you could ever imagine. Go to hasslefreebooks.com and use promo code UNPAUSE to receive a 10% discount off of any book project. Get started right away and become a published author in as little as 45 days. For your free 1-hour book formula guide, which will show you just how painless it can be to become an author, head to hasslefreebooks.com today.
All right. Thanks again for joining me. Let's get started with today's show.
Took a walk down the dark road where they said that I shouldn't go. I knew the dangers of flying.
You are listening to Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes of the Addictions Coach and the Addictions Academy. My guest today is Paul Gilmartin, and from 1995 to 2011, Paul co-hosted TBS's Dinner and a Movie and has been a stand-up comedian since 1987 with appearances on many shows including his half-hour Comedy Central Presents Paul Gilmartin. In 2011, he began the Mental Illness Happy Hour, a weekly audio podcast consisting of interviews with artists, friends, listeners, and the occasional mental health professional about all the battles in our heads. With over 22 million downloads to date and a 5.5 rating on iTunes, it is frequently chosen as the editor's pick by the Apple Podcast staff. It was chosen by Esquire as one of the best podcasts of 2016 and featured in the PBS documentary, A New State of Mind. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks, Callie. Nice to talk to you.
You too. How's your weather out there?
Oh, if I'd gotten out of bed yet, I would be able to tell you.
Oh, boy. You're still in bed. What time is it?
It's noon.
Okay.
Yeah, I went to bed at about 5. I go to bed about 5.
Oh, you're on my schedule.
And that's like the life of a stand-up comedian. If things don't change, if we don't have to get up for a 9-to-5 job, at least for me, this is what it was like when I was a touring stand-up comedian. As you go to bed about 5, and sometimes you'd have to get up and do radio at 7 in the morning, and so then you would come back to the condo or the hotel or wherever it was you were staying after doing media, and it'd be maybe 10 in the morning at that point, and then you would go back and sleep for 6-8 hours, wake up about 4 in the afternoon, and that's kind of your life.
Wow, that sounds stressful. Was that stressful?
You get used to it. Being a professional stand-up comedian, I've found that most people who are professional comedians, there's usually a lot more stress in our life than what time we get up. Most of us are funny, not because we chose to be, but because in childhood we had to be. And so there's always so much more kind of going on mentally and emotionally with comics that you just, it's your normal. You don't have anything to compare it to. So, and having worked a 9-to-5 job before I did stand up, it all felt like school was out for summer. Being able to do what you want during the day and not have anybody be your boss and all those other things, it really kind of made it worthwhile, and being able to speak your mind. But there's also a lot of things about being a stand-up that really sucked, having to look for work every week. Maybe having an audience that was really drunk or didn't want to hear what you had to say, or you're following another act that's killing and you know that you're going to eat it, or the microphone's not working, or there's an echo in the room, or on and on and on and on and on and on and on. So those are the things that you kind of, those become your kind of obsessions, and the things that really start to eat at you is the things that are keeping you from having the career you want. Those are the things that I think most comedians obsess about 90% of the time. Getting laid and getting famous. Those are probably the two biggest, and getting high or drunk.
Did you say getting laid? Is that what I heard you just say?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is interesting. So you're in LA, and I got the opportunity last October to go to the comedy club down there on Sunset and perform with a bunch of comedians. And I see what you guys go through. I definitely couldn't do it. When you get into this, is that your sole goal? To get up there, get girls, get guys, whatever, just get attention? Or is it really a career choice?
I think when I got into it, it was for attention. When I dreamed of doing it as a little boy, it was for attention. I think it was so that I could feel validated that I was special. And I think once the hormones kicked in, the idea of it was, well, man, if I'm famous, I'll be able to get pretty girls.
Okay.
Much like the old trope when you hear musicians talk about the first time they saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, they realized, oh my God, that's how you get girls. And then they went and bought a guitar the next day. But I think with people who are truly creative, kind of where it's not a conscious choice, where you are doing something that is inside you that is just begging to come out, it's more of there's a love of the craft of it as well. So it's kind of a multi-headed monster of, you want to be validated, you want to express something that's inside you, and you want to also experience pleasure. So I'd say with, love, money, recognition, and pleasure.
Okay. Now, let me ask this question. Where does your inspiration to be funny come from? Do you watch TV? Do you read books? It just pop in your head? Is it your childhood? Where do you dig in for comedy? Because I've seen comedians that are hilarious, and I've seen comedians that just aren't funny at all. So I'd like to know where that comes from, that creative edge.
I think it's different for every single person. Now, if you're talking about material, how do you come up with material? Again, each person's different. For me, I would sometimes sit down and try to come up with something and just see what came into my head. Oftentimes it would be something would just pop into my head during the day, and I would jot it down or make a note to remember it. Or I would be laughing with a friend of mine talking about something, and something funny would come out of my mouth, and I'd say, oh, I should do that on stage. Or they'd say, you should do that on stage. Or, they'd say, you'd be better saying that joke. You can have that, or vice versa. And we jot something down. So, and in the beginning, you find yourself maybe I should just speak for myself. I found myself, like a lot of artists do, emulating people that I admire. And then you kind of look back in horror, the longer you're doing it, because you see so clearly that you were almost ripping that person off. But it's pretty common because you don't have a voice yet. And so you are just doing what you think will be the most effective that night at a club. But it's kind of makes you cringe after you've been doing it a few years. The good news is that also means that you've grown.
Yeah. I want to ask you this. So I've, on my side, with the addiction side, mental health side, I've worked with a few comedians. And the one thing they all tell me is most comedians have either an addiction to drugs or alcohol or some sort of a mental health issue from childhood or adulthood that compels them into doing what they do. Would you say that's accurate?
Yep, 100%.
Okay. And how many comedians have you worked with behind the scenes that they were just a complete disaster, but when they got on stage, it was like they pulled it together? And then they'd get off stage and go back to being a disaster. How many comedians are like that, or you have seen like that over the years?
How much time do you have?
Oh, wow. That many, huh?
Yeah.
So what do they do in their downtime? Are they funny in their downtime? Are they depressed? I mean, because you're in that circle and you were in that circle for such a long time. What do they do and how do they cope with what they're going through? Because obviously if they got therapy and got well, they might not want to perform and be funny, correct?
Yeah. I've found that the ones that are the most quirky off stage are the ones that are, well, let me put it this way. There are some comics who aren't fun necessarily to be around off stage. They're not funny off stage. And then there are comics who are really funny off stage and are really funny on stage. And even a few comics who are really funny off stage and aren't that funny on stage. But you do see a lot, especially coming up, who audiences think are funny, but comics don't think are funny at all.
So you guys are even judgmental in your own little group of who's funny and who's not funny.
Oh my God. That's like one of the biggest topics of discussion.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I think you would find the same thing with musicians because all day long we are obsessed with what is funny and is my career moving forward. So when you see somebody who you think isn't funny doing well, you want to know if your peers also feel the same way that you do, because you're trying to gauge, what does success look like? How do I get there? Am I going to be one of the people that gets accepted? You're constantly looking for acceptance and professional success. And you don't know. Every comic has some doubts about whether or not that's going to happen. So you want as much information as possible. And it's also a stress release to, talk shit about somebody that gets on your nerves that you think is a hack, who the industry can't see is unoriginal. And a lot of times that person isn't a nice person too.
Oh, wow. Well, I know what you mean from my standpoint, from, I guess, a consumer standpoint. I've always thought Chris Tucker was hilarious on TV. And I went to see him, and the stand-up just wasn't funny. And I was shocked. It was the first experience I had where what I perceived on TV and then what I actually saw, I wasn't held captive. So I know exactly what you mean. On the flip side, I got to see Ant perform in LA, and he was fucking hilarious. And he was funny off and on the stage. And I was in tears the whole time I was around him. And that's kind of what I held for Chris Tucker, because I've watched his career over the years, and I just felt really let down by that from a consumer standpoint.
Well, right. And that to me highlights the fact that some people are great performers, some people are great writers, and some people are lucky enough to be great at both. And I would probably put Chris Tucker in the category of a great performer, but not a great writer. And so when he's doing a movie that's written in his voice by writers that are funny, he knows how to make it really funny because he is a funny guy. He's just not a funny writer. And the best stand-up comedians that write for themselves tend to be the kind of person that's not the life of the party. They're in the corner wondering, why can't I be the life of the party? You know, what is it that that person has? You know, what do the girls like about it? They're analyzing. They're in their head
Right.
99% of the day. And all of that feeds their writing, their observational skills. Why does society work the way it does? We're just constantly picking it. You know, it's like if society was an engine, we constantly have the wrenches out, taking it apart, looking at it from every single angle, and then get on stage and we kind of put it back together in front of an audience and say, look at this. Why is this way? That's the great writers to me do that. The great performers, they're not interested in taking the engine apart. They'll do whatever it takes to get a laugh, but they're not the philosophers
Right.
that the great writers are.
I guess I've always worked in the musician realm. I mean, I'm married a musician. I know, old school musicians write their own music, perform their own songs. And I know that shifted over the years and now they have writers, and some of these pop artists necessarily don't write their own music or lyrics. They just get up and perform, and some even lip sync and don't know the words, as we've seen. But I didn't realize it was with comedians as well like that. I had assumed erroneously that they did their own work until I had seen Chris Tucker, and then I was shocked. And I was like, wow, it's very similar to the musician side.
Well, I meant that he has always made me laugh when I see him in movies.
Yeah.
Because then that's being written for him.
Right.
His stand-up, I would imagine he is writing for himself, and he is probably not a writer, is the only thing I can come up with, which is why there's such a big gap between his stand-up and his performing in movies.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I can think of. I don't know if he writes his own stand-up, but if you're paying somebody and your stand-up's not funny, you're not paying them enough.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was a packed house. It's interesting.
Or he might have been trying out new material. You never know. But
now let me
if his
ask.
stand-up was great, I think you would have heard about how great his stand-up is by now. Right.
Now let me ask you this question: how many comedians have to drink or use drugs to perform? Because years ago, I got to see Pauly Shore, and this is going back, 15 years ago. And the first thing I noticed was that he was drunk on stage. He was funny as hell, but he was drunk. So how many comedians do you notice in your circle that need to take something to get on stage for anxiety, or they're just better when they're under the influence? They're just funnier.
I would say when you're starting out, in my experience, at least a third. It seems like today maybe there's a little less of it than there used to be. Maybe it's because people are getting help now and not self-medicating as much as when I started out.
Okay.
So yeah, it really kind of depends. But if you were to say, how frequently have you seen people destroy their careers because of mental health or addiction issues? Dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of times.
Yeah.
People that just, their brain takes them out. The brain that got them there is the brain that blew it for them.
Right.
It's kind of like, you ever seen like a race car where the engine is so powerful, like the whole car is shaking, and you're like, yeah, this engine is great, but I don't think the car is going to make it.
Oh yeah.
comedy is kind of like that. It's like you want as big of an engine as possible, but not so big that it destroys the car. And it's kind of like riding that creativity. I always kind of picture as that, because it's a weird dance. It is a weird dance. And I've seen brilliant, brilliant people who never achieved the success they should have because of fear or insecurity or self-destruction or addiction, etc. And then I've seen people who I don't think are funny, who just have a determination and a doggedness that work their asses off. And trust me, comedians, we talk about those people. I'm not going to name any names, but we always just look at each other like, how the fuck does anybody think that person is funny?
Yeah. Well, now let me switch gears on you just a tad and ask you this. You're co-hosting TBS's Dinner and a Movie, and then you switch into the Mental Illness Happy Hour podcast. What made you do that?
Yeah, it wasn't a career choice. It was, I had gone off my meds and depression came back and fooled me. And I thought it was really, that my life really wasn't worth living. And I was considering suicide. And when I realized this was the depression and I had been fooled by it, I thought, my God, I've been seeing a psychiatrist for 10 years. I've been in support groups. I go to therapy. I believe mental illness is a real thing, and I was fooled by it. Somebody has to talk about this, because imagine the person out there that doesn't even believe mental illness is a real thing, and they've got kids, you know?
Right.
Imagine what the negative ripples of that person's life are going to be, not only for their life, but those around them. If there was a way to get through to people like that and let them know it's okay to ask for help, and here's what mental issues can look like and sound like and feel like. If I could do that in a way where I could bring my comedy experience to it, my ability to maybe tell a story or have guests on who can tell stories, maybe it could help. Or at the very least, people out there who know they're battling something but feel alone, this could bring them comfort. And that was the goal in starting it. But I didn't intend for it to be a profession or to make any money. And it just kind of took off. And I found that I loved it a lot more than I liked being on TV or doing stand-up. And so I just slowly kind of put all my energy into that and stopped putting energy into being on TV or going on the road and doing stand-up.
Well, that's wonderful. This actually helps a lot of people, and you enjoy doing it as well. The different guests you have on, do you feel you can connect with them? Or do you feel...
I do.
Okay, so tell me about that.
You know, occasionally there will be a guest that I just can't get their walls to come down, and those are frustrating. And I typically don't air those episodes because to me, a good episode needs that vulnerability. It needs those moments of that person letting the walls down and letting us see that part inside them that they're afraid to show, because everybody has that. And I found that in my life, when other people modeled that for me, they got vulnerable and they showed the part of me that they were ashamed of or stressed about. It made it easier for me to do that. And I realized how powerful it was for me to do that and let all of that weight out. And it helped me stop drinking and using drugs. It helped me be more present, be more productive, creative, better friend, a better listener. I certainly have a long way to go still, but I'm a lot happier and healthier than I used to be. And I think I just kind of wanted to share that with the world in the hopes that I could help somebody in a way that other people helped me, just doing it with a microphone.
That's awesome. So you're using your skill and your talents to not only help yourself, but help other people that might be going through something with mental health or addiction, and they hear the podcast and they say, wow, I can identify with that person. I can identify with what they're going through, and it's going to be okay.
Yeah, that was the hope.
Well, it seems to be working. I mean, with PBS and Esquire and Atlantic Monthly and New York Times, I think you're doing a good job there.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Callie.
So
yeah, I enjoy it.
Good. Let me ask you this question. Any regrets stopping being on TV? Because people, I think we idolize people that get up and do TV and you know, we say, wow, they have everything they could possibly want. They're on TV. They're making money. Do you regret leaving it behind?
No, not for a minute. I miss the paycheck sometimes, but I realized pretty early into the run I had doing dinner and the movie that I don't really like the pressure of being on TV. I don't like the pressure of having to write and perform something I don't have creative control over every week. It really stressed me out. And while there were many, many times when it was an amazing experience that I couldn't believe I was getting paid to do, there were many times when I dreaded it, when I anguished over choices I made, creative choices I made, or creative choices that were kind of forced upon me. And I have so much less of that doing the podcast. And I really got tired doing stand-up of the traveling, of audiences that aren't really societally aware of what's going on. They just want to hear dick jokes. It just started to bore me. And so it was a relief to get away from doing those two things. You know, I still occasionally will perform. I'll do some political satire occasionally as a character. I perform as sometimes, but as far as doing regular stand-up, I haven't done it in probably 6 years. And I really don't do TV anymore. I did a spot on the IFC show Comedy Bang Bang. And I think that's the only thing I've done since 2011. And I remember leaving that after the day of shooting Comedy Bang Bang, just thinking, well, no, I still don't miss TV. You know, I'm sure there are shows out there that I would enjoy being a part of as a writer or a performer, but I would say there are about 0.001% of the things that are out there.
Yeah. It's so interesting hearing that from you, because I think as consumers, we watch TV and we watch, you know, these musicians and such, and we go, wow, you know, they must absolutely love what they do and it's amazing and how awesome. And then I talk to people and they say, you know, it's anxiety. I have anxiety. I have to write. I have to perform. And then, you know, I heard the same thing before that you said, I don't have control. You know, I don't have control over what's edited or what can be done. And, you know, that's your body of work. You know, that's your career. So it gets frustrating. And I've heard a lot of that as well. So it's interesting you said that.
Yeah. It's kind of like being a goalie on a shitty hockey team. And you're like, oh my God, you know, this is affecting my stats. And, you know, these guys may ruin my career. Now, that's not what happened in reality on the TV show, but that's the anxiety that I would have, was that the decisions that were being made around me were going to ruin my career because it would make me harder to be funny.
Yeah.
To do what I felt I needed to do for the show to be funny. And a lot of that was misguided arrogance and lack of trust on my part. But occasionally, I was right. Occasionally, I did know better. But the stress was always there, regardless of who was right.
Right.
And ultimately, I took the parts of it seriously that I shouldn't have. And I didn't take the parts of it seriously enough that I should have.
Interesting.
I'm good at that. I'm good at finding the wrong parts of things to be serious about.
Well, I think that's a lot of artists, all the creative types. And I specialize in working with musicians and actors and such. And it seems like all the creative types, it's like they pick the things that are fun right now. And sometimes it's like, well, you need to be serious about this. I'll worry about that later. But that kind of creeps up on them somewhere along the line. And they end up anxiety or drug addiction or having a meltdown because there's so many moving parts to all these things. And there's so many people that have to be involved. It's not just you, for your career.
Yeah. That to me is hallmark addict behavior, because our normal state is such a high level of discomfort that doing this fun part of it is like the oxygen, and the rest of it is like carbon monoxide.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Let's wrap up here. For our listeners, I want them to be able to find your podcast, The Mental Illness Happy Hour. We're going to put a link up to that. I know it's in a PBS documentary and all over everywhere, which is amazing. And I got the pleasure of being on it and meeting you in person. So thank you for that. Anything else?
It was a great episode, and I will let you know when it airs.
Awesome. Anything you want to leave our listeners with? Any tidbits or takeaways?
A couple of things that I like to say on the show is have compassion for others, but not at the expense of compassion for yourself. And nothing degrades the quality of my life like obsessing about the quality of my life.
That's true. Wow. Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on, Paul. I appreciate it.
Good to talk to you again, Callie. Thank you.
You're welcome. And you've been listening to Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes. And my guest today was Paul Gilmartin of TBS's Dinner and a Movie back in the day and the Mental Illness Happy Hour. Have a great day, guys. Hey, everyone. Thanks again for listening. I really hope you enjoyed the show today. Head on over to iTunes and Apple Podcasts and leave a comment or review of what you think. Or contact us at 1-800-706-0318. If you want to be on our show, feel free to email or call. And if you have a topic, feel free to email or call as well.
Thanks for listening to Unpause Your Life. For show notes and more, head on over to unpauseyourlife.com.
Big shout out to recoveryinnovators.com for help producing this show. Thank you, guys.
I took a walk down the long road where they said that I shouldn't go. On my way found a reason to wake up another day. But they needed to show you all the things that you won't do. Find faith or religion, but nothing to show for it. No need to escape in love with my pain. I may be awake, but I'm alive, still alive, and I won't be bound by your mistake. No, I won't be your enemy, trapped at the gate. Bring me to life, put me to death. Just give me something that's just not so hard to believe. To believe. To believe. I took a walk down the dark road where they said that I shouldn't go. I knew the dangers of flying. Now I'm so far from solid ground. But they needed to show you all the things that you won't do. Find faith or religion, but nothing